For over a decade, some of the biggest technology companies on Earth paid almost no tax in Europe. Not a small discount, almost nothing at all. In 2014, one company's effective tax rate on its European profits was calculated at 0.005%. For every €1,000,000 in profit, it paid about €50 in tax. And for years, remarkably, it was completely legal. This is the story of the double Irish with a Dutch sandwich, one of the most notorious tax strategies in modern history, and the law that finally shut it down, a law that's active right now, reshaping how the world's biggest companies pay tax. Here's how the strategy worked. Since the 1950s, Ireland has offered a low corporate tax rate to attract foreign investment. By the 2000s, companies like Google, Apple, and Facebook had major operations there. Under old Irish law, a company's tax residency depended on where it was managed, not where it was registered. So multinationals set up two Irish companies. The first held valuable patents and licensed them to operating companies across Europe, which paid huge licensing fees back, reducing their taxable profits where customers actually were. That first Irish company shifted its profits to a second Irish company managed from a tax haven with no corporate tax, often Bermuda. Ireland didn't tax it, and the haven didn't tax profits at all. That's the double Irish. For the sandwich, companies routed the licensing payments through a shell company in the Netherlands first, since the Netherlands doesn't charge withholding tax on certain royalty payments moving through it. Ireland, then Netherlands, then Ireland again, then the tax haven. Profits earned from real customers across France, Germany, and the rest of Europe ended up almost entirely untaxed, legally on paper, every step of the way. The scale was staggering. Apple reportedly avoided around $8.5 billion in tax in 2016 alone using this structure. Facebook avoided close to $16 billion in 2018. Google used the Dutch sandwich portion to shield over €15 billion in a single year. None of it was illegal. It exploited real gaps between different countries' tax codes, which is exactly why it took so long to close. A related battle became the most dramatic part of this whole story: Apple versus the European Commission. In 2016, after a 3-year investigation, the Commission ruled that Ireland had given Apple illegal tax benefits, ordering Ireland to recover up to €13 billion in back taxes, the largest such order in EU history at the time. Apple's effective tax rate had dropped to that same 0.005%. Oddly, Ireland didn't even want the money, and both Ireland and Apple appealed the decision together. A lower court initially sided with them in 2020, overturning the order entirely. But the Commission refused to let it go and appealed to the EU's highest court. On September 10, 2024, after a full decade-long legal fight, that court delivered its final verdict. Ireland had granted illegal aid, and the €13 billion plus interest had to be recovered. The ruling was final and could not be appealed any further. The U.S. saw these EU rulings as unfairly targeting American tech giants like Apple and Google. Public pressure had been building for years before that. In 2015, Ireland announced it would close the double Irish loophole to new arrangements, giving companies until the end of 2020 to comply. Some tried new workarounds instead, nicknamed the single malt and the green jersey, but regulators shut those down too. It became clear that patching individual loopholes country by country wasn't enough. So over 140 countries, working together through the OECD, built something far bigger than any single national fix: a global minimum tax of 15%. Here's how it works. If a company's profits anywhere in the world are taxed below that 15% rate, other countries participating in the agreement can step in and collect the difference themselves through what's called a top-up tax. That single mechanism removes the financial incentive to shift profits into tax havens in the first place, because someone, somewhere in the system, will collect the missing tax regardless of how cleverly the money moves. The European Union adopted this through a formal directive, and it's been in force since January 2024, applying to large multinational companies with global revenues typically above €750 million. The OECD estimates this single change could generate around $150 billion in additional global tax revenue every single year. This doesn't ban companies from operating in low-tax countries, and it doesn't close every loophole. Critics say smaller countries may struggle to audit complex structures, and companies will keep looking for new gaps at the edges. But compared to an era when a company could legally pay a tax rate measured in thousandths of a percent, a 15% floor is arguably the biggest shift in international tax rules in almost a century. This story isn't really about clever accounting. It's about the gap between what's technically legal and what feels genuinely fair, and how long it can take governments to close that gap when trillions of dollars and some of the most powerful companies on the planet sit on the other side of the table. The double Irish-Dutch sandwich wasn't fraud, and it wasn't hacking anything. It was following the rules exactly as they were written, rules that simply hadn't kept pace with how global digital businesses actually operate. That's really what a legal loophole is at its core, not breaking the law, but exploiting the space it accidentally left open, sometimes for decades, until enough pressure finally builds to close it. It's worth pausing on how strange this whole saga really is. A company can follow every rule perfectly, hire the best tax lawyers money can buy, and still end up at the center of the largest tax dispute in European history, simply because the rules themselves were never designed for a world where profits can move across borders in seconds, while factories, workers, and customers stay firmly in place. Ireland spent years defending arrangements it insisted were legal, while other European governments watched billions in potential revenue disappear into structures with names like the single malt and the green jersey. It took public outrage, investigative journalism, and years of political pressure just to get everyone talking about a real fix, and even longer to actually agree on one. So next time you hear about a massive company paying almost no tax somewhere, remember Ireland, the Netherlands, and Bermuda. And remember that it took the entire world working together, over a decade, one court case, and 140 countries agreeing on a single number to finally close that door. The double Irish-Dutch sandwich is gone, but the 15% global minimum tax it left behind is very much alive today, quietly reshaping how the world's biggest companies pay tax right now, in 2026. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to Legal Loopholes for more real laws and legal loopholes from around the world. Drop a comment and tell us the biggest legal loophole you've ever heard of. We might cover it next. See you in the next video.